The guns of Navarone rekindled the fire and fury of war through unyielding heroes, standing tall as a cinematic monument of the 1960s. But few realize that behind that glory lies a chilling web of hidden deaths and long-buried scandals. Let's uncover the haunting stories of these legendary stars and honor the legacy they left behind. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's go. Anthony Quinn as Colonel Andrea Stavros. Anthony Quinn, born Manuel Antonio Rodolfo Quinn, Oaxaca, on April 21, 1915, in Chihuahua, Mexico, stunned the world in 1961 when he was 46 years old, with his role as Colonel Andrea Stavros in The Guns of Navarone, a fierce Greek resistance fighter burning with private grief and moral conflict. His performance not only captured the brutal toughness of war, but reflected something deeply personal from Quinn's own life. Quinn's personal life was a whirlwind of ongoing tension. The sudden death of his firstborn son, little Christopher, who drowned in a neighbor's lily pond at just 2 years old, left a wound that never healed. His wife at the time, Catherine DeMille, adopted daughter of legendary director Cecil B. DeMille, eventually left him in 1965 after enduring countless affairs. The divorce ended nearly 3 decades of marriage, but didn't stop Quinn's notorious infidelity. Soon after, he began a relationship with Italian costume designer Jolanda Adalori, a romance that started in the shadows but lasted over 30 years and produced 3 more children. Yet even in this marriage, Quinn strayed, fathering children with his secretary and a film producer in Los Angeles. In the 1990s, when he was over 80 years old, he became a father once again, twice, with his final wife, Catherine Benvin, whom he married just a few years before his death. Legal battles over custody, bitter disputes over inheritance, and chilling accusations from his own children painted a picture of a screen legend who lived chaotically off-screen. Quinn wasn't just known for acting, he was also a painter, author, failed architect, and passionate social activist. But his wide-ranging talents often came with a fiery temperament. Many directors admitted that Quinn was quick to anger, demanded to be the center of attention, and sometimes halted entire productions over unreasonable requests. Still, he was beloved for his irreplaceable charisma, which earned him 2 Academy Awards and countless international honors. By the time he passed away in 2001, his net worth was estimated at $20 million, much of it from films, books, and artwork sold around the world. Anthony Quinn died on June 3, 2001, in Boston, after a long battle with throat cancer and respiratory failure. He chose not to be buried in a grand cemetery, but instead rests in the private garden of his Rhode Island home, beneath an old maple tree where he used to paint at sunset. Gregory Peck as Captain Keith Mallory. Gregory Peck was born on April 5, 1916. In 1961, when he was 45 years old, he played Captain Keith Mallory in The Guns of Navarone, a calm, calculating New Zealand mountaineer scarred by the invisible wounds of war. The role cemented his image as a stoic hero with unmatched emotional depth. But beyond the spotlight, Peck's life was filled with quiet heartbreak. His first marriage to Greta Kukkonen, a gentle Finnish woman, collapsed after more than a decade, during a time when rumors swirled about his affair with Ingrid Bergman during the filming of Spellbound, 1945. Though both remained silent, behind-the-scenes letters and whispers suggested that it was this emotional detour that broke up his home. Yet his deepest pain came in 1975, when his eldest son, Jonathan, died by suicide at the age of 30. The loss shattered Peck. He became more withdrawn, emotionally distant from colleagues, and even from his remaining children. Though still seen as dignified and compassionate in public, those close to him said he often stared into space, sleepless, haunted. "You never get over losing a child," he once said. "You just learn to live quietly with the pain." After this tragedy, Peck changed. He became more guarded on set, sometimes demanding script changes to protect his carefully built image of the ideal man. One director revealed that Peck insisted on cutting scenes that portrayed his characters as weak or emotionally unstable. Still, to audiences, he remained the unforgettable Atticus Finch, the embodiment of justice in To Kill a Mockingbird, 1962, a role that won him an Oscar and cemented his place as a moral compass for America. Thanks to his long career, real estate investments, and behind-the-scenes deals, his net worth at the time of his death was estimated at $40 million. Gregory Peck passed away in his sleep on June 12, 2003, at the age of 87, due to pneumonia and respiratory failure. His funeral was attended by Hollywood legends, but the most moving tribute came from Brock Peters, the actor his character once defended on screen. David Niven as Corporal John Anthony Miller. David Niven was born on March 1, 1910. In 1961, when he was 51 years old, he portrayed Corporal John Anthony Miller in The Guns of Navarone, a demolition expert with nerves of steel and a razor-sharp intellect. Niven's quiet wit and poise gave the film its understated elegance. But behind that charm was a life filled with loss and contradiction. Orphaned at a young age after his father was killed in World War I, Niven was raised by a strict stepfather and often clashed with authority. Before acting, he served in the British Army, and when World War II broke out, he returned to service, one of the few major actors to rejoin active duty, eventually working in British intelligence. His first wife, Primula Rollo, tragically died in 1946 after falling down a flight of stairs during a party. The sudden loss devastated him. Though he later remarried and had 2 sons, Niven was said to have never fully recovered from that grief. Despite his elegant screen persona, Niven battled health issues in his final years. In the early 1980s, he was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. The illness robbed him of his voice and mobility, though he continued to appear in public with grace and humor. Niven passed away on July 29, 1983, at the age of 73 in his home in Switzerland. His net worth was estimated at $5 million at the time, a modest sum compared to the dignity and legacy he left behind as one of Britain's finest gentlemen of the silver screen. Irene Papas as Maria Papadimos. Irene Papas was born on September 3, 1929, in Greece. When she was 32 years old, she portrayed Maria Papadimos, a fierce female resistance fighter in The Guns of Navarone, 1961. Her performance brought to life a woman who was both tender and unbreakable amid the chaos of war. It left international audiences stunned by Papas's silent yet powerful beauty, a beauty forever associated with resilience and sacrifice. But behind the spotlight was a life marked by solitude and unspoken pain. Papas was raised in a strict household in Corinth and was forced into marriage at just 18 years old to a man over 30 years her senior. The short-lived marriage ended in heartbreak, leaving behind emotional scars that lasted for decades. Though rumors linked her to Marlon Brando and director Federico Fellini, Papas never remarried, choosing instead a quiet, almost monastic life in her own home. Her career spanned many classics, including Zorba the Greek, Electra, The Trojan Women, and Iphigenia, where she portrayed tragic Greek heroines, roles that eerily mirrored her own fate. In her later years, Papas began showing signs of memory loss, and in 2013, she was formally diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. From that point on, she withdrew from public life, cut off contact with old friends, and refused all offers to return to the screen. On September 14, 2022, Irene Papas passed away in Athens after a long battle with illness when she was 93 years old. Her funeral was held privately in accordance with Greek Orthodox traditions, near the village where she grew up. Her estimated net worth at the time of her death was between $3 and $5 million, earned primarily from film royalties and her contributions to classic theater. Anthony Quail as Major Roy Franklin. Sir John Anthony Quail was born on September 7, 1913. When he was 48 years old, he made a strong impression as Major Roy Franklin in The Guns of Navarone, 1961, a gravely wounded but courageous officer, whose sense of duty and inner dignity reflected the real-life temperament of Quail himself. His marriage to American actress Dorothy Hyson, his second wife, lasted over 40 years, but it was rumored to be a cover marriage. Whispers about Quail's extramarital affairs, including alleged relationships with men in the British theater scene, once stirred behind-the-scenes gossip. Though they had 3 children, many in the industry described Quail as distant, private, and someone who prioritized his career over family ties. He was knighted in 1985, but in his final years, Quail fell into deep depression. According to relatives, he often secluded himself in his study, quietly writing fictionalized accounts of his wartime memories, stories he never fully published. When diagnosed with liver cancer, he refused prolonged treatment, as if quietly ready to let go. On October 20, 1989, he passed away at his home in Chelsea at the age of 76. His net worth at the time, mostly earned through film and stage work, was estimated between $5 and $10 million, a modest sum for such a prolific career, but one that reflected a life lived with dignity rather than display. Percy Herbert as Sergeant Grogan. Percy Herbert was born on July 31, 1920 in East London. When he was 41 years old, he took on the role of Sergeant Grogan in The Guns of Navarone, 1961, a hardened, no-nonsense veteran. But few knew that before stepping into the spotlight, Herbert had survived a real-life nightmare that few could imagine. During World War II, he was captured and spent 4 years imprisoned at the Changi POW camp, one of the most infamous Japanese-run facilities. He survived a bombing while landing in Singapore, jumped from a sinking ship with a broken collarbone, escaped the massacre at Alexandra Hospital, and was later forced to work on the infamous Burmese Railway. The trauma never left him. Upon returning to London after the war, Herbert began a new life in theater and film, though he remained haunted by his memories. When cast in The Bridge on the River Kwai, he not only acted but also served as a consultant, having once been a real prisoner in that exact environment. Though often cast as rough soldiers or tough men, Herbert struggled privately with alcohol and gambling. He frequently showed up drunk on set, once even threatening a co-star and halting production. His marriage to beloved wife Amy ended due to infidelity and reckless spending. His children later shared that during his darkest days, he was impossible to live with, violent, irritable, and hopeless. By the 1970s, he was nearly bankrupt. Percy Herbert died of a heart attack on December 6, 1992, in Broadstairs, Kent, when he was 72 years old. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at less than $100,000, a small amount for a man who had stood in the heart of so many war epics. James Robertson Justice as Commodore Jensen. James Robertson Justice was born on June 15, 1907. When he was 54 years old, he took on the role of Commodore Jensen in The Guns of Navarone, 1961, a commanding intelligence officer whose booming voice and presence became his trademark. On screen, he always seemed born to command. But behind the scenes was a stormy life filled with shadows. Born in London to a working-class family, Justice spent much of his life trying to erase his roots. He invented a false biography for himself, claiming Scottish nobility, foreign wars, falconry, motorcycling, even peacekeeping missions in SAR. Some say this was out of pride, others say it was a way to hide his deepest pain, the sudden death of his only son in 1949, when the boy was just 4 years old. That loss shattered him, leading to a downward spiral of drinking, rage, and toxic relationships. His wife, Nurse Dilys Hayden, left him after nearly 3 decades of misery. His career declined sharply after a series of major strokes starting in 1968. By 1970, he was declared bankrupt, having lost everything due to lavish spending and failed business ventures. Once beloved as the iconic Sir Lancelot Spratt in British comedy, Justice's reputation unraveled. He was rumored to have assaulted a director and been banned temporarily from working in the UK. His life ended in bitter irony. 3 days before his death, he married actress Irene von Meyendorff, a move many suspected was made purely to transfer what little remained of his estate. James Robertson Justice died in poverty on July 2, 1975, at the age of 68, following an irreversible stroke. His ashes were scattered across a desolate field in Spinningdale, Scotland, a place he once called his imaginary homeland. At the time of his death, his net worth was less than $500,000, an unremarkable end to a life once lived at the height of cinematic grandeur, but ultimately consumed by illusion, regret, and tragedy. Gia Scala as Anna. Gia Scala was born on March 3, 1934, in Liverpool, England. When she was 27 years old, she portrayed Anna, the mute Greek resistance fighter in The Guns of Navarone, 1961. Though her role had few lines, Scala's haunting gaze and wounded presence gave the character unforgettable depth, hinting at a life buried in silence, both on-screen and off. After a peaceful childhood in rural Sicily, Gia moved to the U.S. at age 16 to live with her aunt and pursue her dream of becoming an actress. Under Hollywood's transformation machine, she was pressured to dye her hair, cap her teeth, change her name, and mold herself into a cold beauty icon. But behind the spotlight was immense personal pain. The death of her mother in 1957 shattered her mentally, and a breakup with Steve McQueen left her emotionally adrift. Her marriage to actor Don Burnett, once seen as a safe harbor, ended in 1970 amid rumors of domestic violence and a traumatic miscarriage that sent Scala spiraling. By the mid-1960s, Scala had become dependent on alcohol and sedatives. Her erratic behavior led to her being dropped from major projects, including a lead role in a war film. In 1969, she was arrested for public intoxication. In her final years, Gia lived in isolation in a rundown house in the Hollywood Hills, barely keeping in touch with former colleagues. On the night of April 30, 1972, Gia Scala was found dead and alone, surrounded by empty bottles of sleeping pills and alcohol. She was just 38 years old. Her death was ruled an accidental overdose of ethanol and barbiturates. No suicide note was left. At the time of her passing, her net worth had dwindled to only $100,000. Richard Harris as Squadron Leader Barnsby. Richard Harris was born on October 1, 1930, in Limerick, Ireland. When he was 31 years old, he took on the role of Squadron Leader Barnsby, a brave, headstrong pilot, in the sequel Force 10 from Navarone, 1978. The character mirrored Harris's real-life persona, fearless, rebellious, and forever breaking the mold. After his breakthrough in This Sporting Life, 1963, Harris was hailed as a rising star of British cinema. But his fiery temperament and reckless lifestyle made him both a legend and a cautionary tale. He battled alcoholism for decades, often destroying film sets and personal relationships. His marriage to Elizabeth Reese Williams collapsed after over a decade due to infidelity and violent outbursts fueled by drinking. His two sons, who later found success in the arts, once described their father as both a mythic figure and an uncontrollable storm. In 2002, Harris was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. He maintained a composed front, famously declaring he wouldn't die until finishing the final Harry Potter film. But on October 25, 2002, he passed away at University College Hospital in London at the age of 72, surrounded by his three sons. He had refused chemotherapy. At the time of his death, Richard Harris's net worth was estimated at $20 million. James Darren as Spyros Papademos. James William Ercolani, known professionally as James Darren, was born on June 8, 1936, in Philadelphia. When he was 25 years old, he played Spyros Papademos, a young, fearless Greek resistance fighter whose life was cut short in the guns of Navarone, 1961. Though a supporting role, it became a symbol of youth sacrificed in war, and a metaphor for Darren's own conflicted journey. Darren started out like many dreamers from South Philly, but good looks and luck landed him a spot in Hollywood. With his role as Moondoggie in the Gidget series, he became a teenage heartthrob. But fame came too fast. "I wasn't really a singer," he later admitted. "I sang just so people wouldn't forget me." Trapped in a golden boy image, Darren never felt he had the chance to show emotional depth, often describing himself as a fraud. His personal life was just as complex. His first marriage to Gloria Terlitsky ended quickly, marked by emotional distance. Their only son, Jim Moray, grew up using the surname of his stepfather, highlighting the emotional gap that lasted decades. Darren later married Danish beauty queen Evie Norland and had 2 more sons, but the wounds of his early fame never fully healed. On September 2, 2024, James Darren died in his sleep at the age of 88 from congestive heart failure caused by a weakened aortic valve. His net worth at the time of death was estimated at $10 million. Brian Forbes as Cone. Brian Forbes, born John Theobald Clark on July 22, 1926 in London, played the role of Cone, a quiet, understated soldier, in The Guns of Navarone, 1961, when he was 35 years old. Though his character had few lines, it conveyed quiet resolve, a reflection of Forbes himself, strong-willed, deeply conflicted, and always fighting inner battles. Behind his calm exterior, Forbes clashed repeatedly within the film industry. In 1975, while directing The Stepford Wives, he became embroiled in a public feud with screenwriter William Goldman, a brutal tug-of-war over creative control. That same year, Forbes was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Rather than go public, he chose to keep it secret, even from close friends, fearing it would end his career. He lived under constant strain, fighting a deteriorating body while struggling to remain relevant in an unpredictable industry. His marriage to actress Nanette Newman, his muse and longtime collaborator, wasn't immune to tension. In the 1980s, rumors swirled about periods of separation and his controlling tendencies, particularly when it came to her film roles. Neither ever confirmed nor denied the stories, but the emotional distance between them became a quiet scar in Forbes's later life. Brian Forbes died on May 8, 2013, at the age of 86, at his modest home in Virginia Water, Surrey. His net worth at the time was estimated at around $10 million, earned through directing, writing, and film royalties. But his legacy, by all accounts, was never measured in dollars. Alan Cuthbertson as Major Baker. Alan Darling Cuthbertson was born on April 7, 1920, in Perth, Australia. When he was 41 years old, he appeared in The Guns of Navarone, 1961, as Major Baker, a by-the-book military figure, rigid, bureaucratic, and resistant to change. Though a supporting role, his piercing glare and razor-sharp voice left a lasting impression on audiences. Behind the cinematic uniform, however, was a man full of contradictions. Although he worked constantly on British stage and television, Cuthbertson led an intensely private life. He was rumored to have a harsh temper and frequently scolded backstage staff, particularly younger crew members. Several directors reportedly avoided working with him due to his reputation for being difficult, despite his punctuality and meticulous professionalism. An unconfirmed scandal once circulated through London's theatre world about a secret relationship between Cuthbertson and a male playwright, something he neither confirmed nor denied. The rumors cost him a leading role in a major BBC series and led to a noticeable decline in offers. Though married for many years to Dr. Gertrude Wilner, a Jewish refugee who fled Nazi Germany, their bond was said to be distant. They had one adopted child, but those close to the family claimed Cuthbertson rarely allowed personal emotion to influence his home life. In his later years, he lived in relative seclusion in Surbiton near London, often declining interviews and skipping major arts events. Alan Cuthbertson died on February 8, 1988, when he was 67 years old. At the time of his passing, his net worth was estimated at around $2 million, earned through hundreds of supporting roles on stage and screen. Yet his legacy was tinged with melancholy and quiet tragedy. Walter Gotel as Musil. Walter Jack Gotel was born on March 15, 1924, in Bonn, Germany. He was of Jewish descent and fled the Nazi regime at age 14, immigrating to England and starting his life from scratch. When he was 37 years old, Gotel played Musil, a cold, menacing German officer in The Guns of Navarone, 1961. The role paved the way for him to become a go-to face for villains, most famously as General Gogol in the James Bond series, a character who evolved from nemesis to unlikely ally of 007. But behind the silver screen uniform lay a shadowed life. Despite his global fame as a steely KGB agent, Gotel lived in deep loneliness. After the death of his first wife, Yvonne Hills, in 1974, the mother of his only daughter, he became emotionally withdrawn. Though he remarried not long after, the relationship was strained. Family members claimed he rarely kept in contact with his daughter and refused to discuss his personal life in interviews. In his later years, Gotel reportedly turned to sleeping pills and light alcohol to cope with long-standing solitude. He was said to have become volatile on set. One incident during a Bond shoot allegedly involved him shoving a fellow actor, which the studio quietly resolved. Walter Gotel died of cancer on May 5, 1997, when he was 73 years old. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $3 million, enough for a comfortable life, but never enough to fill the void left by years of isolation and addiction. Stanley Baker as Chief Petty Officer Butcher Brown. Stanley Baker was born on February 28, 1928, in Wales. When he was 33 years old, he took on the role of Chief Petty Officer Butcher Brown in The Guns of Navarone, 1961, a tough, hot-headed but loyal mechanic vital to the mission to destroy the Nazi superguns. The role perfectly matched Baker's rugged screen persona. From an early age, Baker faced hardship, violence, and a fight for survival. These harsh childhood memories seeped into his performances, particularly in his portrayal of morally complex, brutal men. Yet that man of steel image often trapped him in emotional isolation. His marriage to actress Ellen Martin lasted nearly 30 years and produced 4 children, but was riddled with rumors of infidelity, depression, and alcohol dependency. During the 1970s, even as he reached the peak of his fame and began producing films, most notably Zulu, 1964, which he co-produced, Baker's life began to spiral. A heavy smoker with mounting financial pressure, his health sharply declined. In 1976, when he was just 48 years old, Baker was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. He died on June 28, 1976, in Malaga, Spain. Though he did not leave behind a vast fortune, his net worth at the time of death was estimated at around $2 million. Baker's legacy in British cinema remains profound. With more than 70 film roles to his name, many of his characters are considered irreplaceable, even by today's standards of digital recreation. The legacy of The Guns of Navarone lives on, not just in the thrills of war and heroism, but in the silent battles its stars endured behind the scenes. Many are gone, and many left us in heartbreak. What's your favorite moment from The Guns of Navarone? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories from cinema history.